Hello, everyone. Happy Feast of Mary Magdalene. I'm just adjusting everything here. Of Mary Magdalene to everyone who, sorry, I'm just trying to get the right light. Happy Feast of Mary Magdalene to everyone who will or is listening to this recording. I plan to do this in a private way, but I thought that perhaps some other people would like to participate in this or listen to this later. So I'm going to speak about my connection with Mary Magdalene, about Mary Magdalene as the other goddess. I'm going to give a little reading from Mary Magdalene and a short meditation afterwards. So once again, happy feast of Mary Magdalene. So for me, the feast of Mary Magdalene is really the feast of the other goddess. And I'm not very good with visual things, but I managed to prepare something beautiful for myself, a beautiful cup of tea and a candle to celebrate. And I brought my book, A Labor of Many Years of Love, The Other Goddess. And before I start, I don't want to sound too promotional, but hello, I already have someone. Greetings, radiant ones. Hello, hello. Good to see you. But for anybody who wants to, who buys the book or puts a review of the book on Amazon, and please message me privately on my Facebook, Dr. Joanna Kujawa, and then I will send you a PDF of a journaling workbook to find the lost goddess in your life. So welcome to everyone. Happy Feast of Mary Magdalene. So for me, Mary Magdalene is really a feast of the other goddess. And who is the other goddess? The other goddess is this other part of a suppressed human consciousness. And just to make sure that everyone can hear me properly. And I always tell the story that, when I was in Jerusalem, in the Church of Mary Magdalene on the Mount of Olives, which was a very beautiful spiritual experience, I saw the image of her with her hand extended, and I immediately knew that she had some message for us. And through my research, I made connection between her and other goddesses. I'm aware that other people made this connection as well, but I'm talking about my personal discovery. So normally, this extended hand suggests that she had the egg in her hand, and she went to the emperor to prove to him that resurrection is possible. And when he said resurrection is not possible, the egg in her head turned red. But the same image is being repeated historically through representations of many other goddesses, such as and if anyone wants to say something, please let me know if you can hear me properly. Such as, for example, Nimna, ancient Sumerian goddess, who is portrayed usually with the tree of life and wisdom, and tree of life and knowledge. She sits upright on a chair, just a little bit like that, except that she probably sits on the throne. And what is interesting, not only she has her hand extended with a gift, which is a fruit or some other gift to the man who represents humanity on the other side of the tree, but she also has a serpent behind her, which usually in esoteric sources suggests great wisdom. This is in esoterica, great wisdom, and the snake is upright, so it means it is uncoiled. So there are many different interpretations for this. Apart from wisdom, I would call it a higher wisdom or illumination or enlightenment that the goddess offers to us, or a spiritual evolution. And it could suggest for me also, as I'm interested in Tantra as well, the unfoldment of the Kundalini energy, as well as a unfoldment of our DNA, which is now in a scientific jargon called the junk DNA. And we all know now that this is not a junk DNA, that this is a DNA that helps us to evolve spiritually, to evolve as species. So this is goddess Nimna, and she is as ancient, and she's often called the mother of Anunnaki, right? Who helped to develop human beings. So it's quite interesting that she shows up in mythology like that. Then a slightly younger goddess, goddess Inanna, who is also the beloved goddess of many people nowadays, she is represented in a similar way, but very often she has, first of all, wings, and very often she holds a snake or a reed in her, or a serpent or a reed in her hand, which also supposed to symbolize the transition between death and life, but also transition between different dimensions. And I think this is what we should focus on, then transitions between different dimensions, which basically between different states of consciousness. And I'll explain it in a moment, but I just want to show similarities between different goddesses and Mary Magdalene. And another goddess that is portrayed in a similar way is, of course, goddess Isis, the great Egyptian goddess Isis, which is also a goddess of high magic. And in the other goddess, I give her some of her incantations because she is called a goddess of high magic for a good reason, simply because she believed that high magic, actually goddess Isis, and repeating her name, gives us access to what is called the divine mind, or basically a mind above the matrix, which allows us to correct the things, that are not right. So if something in the creation or the process of creation went wrong or is unjust, through the power of words and incantations, this can be changed. So for the benefit of all. Similarly, there is a similar story to this with goddess Inanna, who stole the power of Me. And May is, the power of creating civilization, it is understood, but I think that is a little bit deeper than that. Both goddesses are also associated with the idea of resurrection, just like Mary Magdalene, because goddess Inanna resurrected her lover. First of all, she resurrected herself because she needed to go underground, and then she resurrected her goddess Dumuzi or Tumuz, and Isis resurrected her husband Osiris to conceive a child Horus with him. So these are the similarities between Mary Magdalene and other goddesses. But what does it really symbolize? This passage between death and life, and this portal, between different levels of consciousness. And I think that what the other goddess is trying to teach us, it is that we have access, that we are much more than we are told we are, that we have access to a higher consciousness, and she wants to provide us with the tools and understanding how we can reach this higher consciousness. And quite perhaps controversially, in my book, I refer to esoteric traditions of Tantra, but also esoteric tradition of Gnosticism, who say that we can reach this expanded state of consciousness meditating on Eros or through a sexual act. But I would like to say also this is not the only method, because people often ask me, is it the only method? It's not the only method. And I'll explain later why I chose to speak about Eros, about this method of reaching other state of consciousness through spiritual and sexual practices. And I think this is what the serpent behind goddess Inanna suggests, the evolved DNA. And also this is or the unfoldment of Kundalini energy, which is a movement of energy, along a spine. And some of us already experienced it, and I experienced it, and I also describe it in the other goddess. So this gift is really a reminder for us. This gift of a goddess is the reminder of us that we are much more than we are what we are told that we actually are. And she wants us to have access to this other state of consciousness. And this is not done through achieving things in the external world. This is not done through transhumanism, which is, using technology to prolong our lives, but through a natural evolvement of our consciousness. And I think that this beautiful scene between Jesus and Mary Magdalene, for those of us who are more traditionally minded, which is often portrayed in different paintings, when she says, when she sees Jesus after resurrection, and he says memu aptu, which means do not hold on to me because I have not ascended yet. It means that he was moving to another state of consciousness. He was moving, but in this sense, not only different state of consciousness, but he was moving to a different state of beingness. And this different state of beingness is also possible for us. So it's basically moving from a different dimension, let's say from 3D dimension to 5D or 12D dimension, right? Because for him as a great evolved being, it was possible, and it was also possible for her. And I would just like to mention that I do believe that for some reason, the wisdom of the other goddess was being hijacked and suppressed for centuries. However, it is also hidden in the plain sight, because even as some other writers, including Michael Hearns, who is a mathematician, who did some calculations, and also some scholars of the Old Testament, Mary Magdalene and other goddesses, such as Asherah and so on, are hidden in many passages of all scriptures. So, for example, the fact that Mary Magdalene sees Jesus, and there are also two angels, especially in Luke, she is the necessary force for this transformation. She's not the only as a messenger. So she's the necessary force, because in both esoteric Egyptian and also in some Jewish traditions, the high priestess was actually necessary for the king to ascend. So she is the doer of the ascension, so to speak. So I give lots of sources to this in my book, so I'm not going to go into this in depth. But I wanted to say that somehow her wisdom and the importance of this goddess as high priestess was suppressed, and it is our job to uncover this, not only to honor Mary Magdalene, not only to honor the priestesses of the past, but to honor ourselves, and our own potential, the higher potential that is hidden from us. And so this higher potential is mentioned in many sources, including a beautiful poem of which I actually attended a lecture yesterday, who is probably ancient Egyptian poem, an early Christian poem, Gnostic poem, Find the Perfect Mind, where the goddess expresses herself, that she's everything, I am the virgin, I am the whore, I am the wholeness. So she embraces all our experiences, and she wants us to find ourselves in all our experiences. So why do you think the goddess was suppressed, the other goddess was suppressed? And it's quite interesting, because recently I was giving a talk at the Carl Jung Society in Melbourne, and there's this beautiful Jungian concept. Carl Jung was a Swiss psychologist who was really looking into the depth of human psyche and human soul. And this is the concept of a shadow. And he said the presence of a shadow cannot be argued out of existence. And what is a shadow? Shadow is not something bad. Shadow is something that we do not accept, that we reject, or it was hidden from us, and without it we cannot evolve fully. So in my research, in my opinion, two things are our major shadows collectively. One shadow, and it cannot be argued out of existence, is the shadow of a goddess. The goddess, for whatever reason, I'm not going to get into this in this talk, was suppressed. This part of consciousness that represents the divine consciousness of the goddess was suppressed, and we live only through our rational mind, through our rational reason, which is called masculine consciousness at the moment. And this consciousness of the goddess cannot be argued out of existence. This is the shadow that is slowing us down, because we are here to honor her, and we are here to integrate her into our consciousness. And this applies to both women and men, because we all carry both masculine and feminine consciousness. So this is one shadow, and she cannot be argued out of existence, because look at all of the books written recently about the goddess. And for last few decades, actually, my book is one of many only, and that's why I call it the other goddess. But and Mary Magdalene especially, because she's coming back to consciousness. Kevin Bergman, we are the Trinity of gods. Gods. Yes. Okay. So I'm not sure if I understand what you're saying, but we are Trinity. Trinity is actually a good explanation because it, in a normal sense, in an airy sense, it also includes Goddess Sophia, which is the divine wisdom, she was a part of Trinity. I'm sorry, but there are different names, right? So the God is both. If this is the point, Kevin, I'm not sure that the divine is both masculine and feminine, and actually the reason why I'm focusing on the feminine, because I think that masculine, is right now leading, and the feminine has to basically come to the surface, become empowered, so we can basically join in this divine masculine and feminine evolution, so we can evolve spiritually. So I believe that the divine feminine, especially the one that is fully accepted, body and soul, is one of the shadows. The other shadow, on the other hand, is the shadow of our sexuality. Because, let's say, at least last 2000 years, as I was studying, in most spiritual traditions, apart from esoteric branches of the traditions, sexuality was repressed. Also in our society, sexuality, and we have to admit, it was misused and also demeaned, and continues to be so, or used for wrong purposes. And I believe that our sexuality, and this is what esoteric traditions and the goddess traditions are teaching us, has to be incorporated fully into our being in a conscious way. And in fact, many hidden esoteric traditions, whether in esoteric tantra or in some even Gnostic traditions, such as groups like the Nassenis or Periatics or even Carpocratians, and if you want, I can have other talks about it, who use also sexuality as a means of reaching the divine mind or, spiritual rapture. And I do not believe that we can fully evolve without addressing these two shadows in our lives. The shadow of a goddess, which is a goddess consciousness, which was suppressed, and we can argue whether it was intentional or not, and the goddess of our own Eros, which is also suppressed or demeaned or portrayed in the worst possible way, and also used in the worst possible way because we don't know how to use it properly. So I do believe that these two shadows have to be acknowledged respectfully and consciously before we can actually evolve spiritually. So I would like us to think about the feast of Mary Magdalene as a feast of the other goddess, and the feast of ourselves, how we can incorporate these shadows, because as Carl Jung says, a shadow cannot be argued out of existence. It is there, and it is going to haunt us until we consciously integrate it into our own life. And I do believe that some Gnostic writings and some esoteric writings of Tantra, of classical Tantra, of Hinduism, actually talk about this, that we need to basically incorporate both the feminine and the sexual or Eros into our being to fully evolve and to be able to ascend. There's lots of talking about ascension recently, and I believe that this is absolutely necessary. And just if you would like to indulge me, I would like to speak about one part of my book, which is Mary Magdalene in Alexandria, because I was giving lots of thought and research, as I'm allowing myself to be a little bit playful here. I like to call myself spiritual detective, and I wanted to know what happened to Mary Magdalene after the event of resurrection, after the event of crucifixion. And I know that there are many popular theories about Mary Magdalene going to France, and they're quite legitimate, and I look into them in The Other Goddess. However, I thought we know that she went to France, if she did, 15 years after the event of crucifixion. So I looked into the time, what happened, to her between Holy Land and France. And through my research and through research of other scholars, and I just made these connections, I believe that Mary Magdalene went to Alexandria in Egypt, because Alexandria was the cultural and spiritual and scientific center of the world at the time. And I do believe that, as the Gnostic teachings tell us, and by the way, for those of us who are not familiar with Gnostic Gospels and documents, Gnostic Gospels were discovered in Nag Hammadi in Egypt in 1945. And they are the rejected Gospels which were not accepted to the Bible in the 4th century, because the Bible was actually not created until 325 at the Council of Nicaea, and before that there were many other Gospels, but only 4 were accepted to the Bible, mostly for political reasons. And I have other talks about it, which you can check. So in the Gnostics believe that Jesus gave 3 levels of teachings. One to everyone around the Sea of Galilee as he was walking, and I was there. It's a beautiful area. And then the other one to his disciples, and the third one to Mary Magdalene, who was the most advanced disciple. And in many Gnostic teachings and documents, such as the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, which was discovered actually about 50 years before Nag Hammadi, and in Gospel of Philip and in Pistis Sophia and other Gnostic works, Mary Magdalene is portrayed as the favorite disciple of Jesus, with the only disciple perhaps with whom he shared, his esoteric and most advanced teachings. So in the spirit, I was thinking, what would Mary Magdalene do after Jesus was crucified, simply because it was not safe to stay in Holy Land anymore? So in my research, and from the research of another scholar, John E. Taylor, she told me, in her research, she said that in ancient Alexandria, there was a group called Therapete, who were, philosophers who accepted women to their circles. So this is what I learned from her. And I thought this is very interesting, that there was a group of philosophers that accepted spiritually gifted women to their circle, because, women had really few rights then, right? So I thought, if just kind of thinking, if I were Mary Magdalene, where would I go? I am the most advanced disciple of Jesus. I would probably go to Alexandria, because it was a safe place to be. And also there I could continue with my work. So I have learned from my own research that the Therapeta had connections not only with the Gnostic groups in the Holy Land, such as the Essenes, for example, and some scholars believe that Jesus and Mary Magdalene were connected with the Essenes, and so was John the Baptist, but also they were called the healers, and they had a connection with the temple of Isis in Alexandria. So I thought perhaps she went there, right? And then I started to look into the possibilities, if there was a woman who could be Mary Magdalene in Alexandria in the first century, And I discovered that indeed there was a woman who was called Mary the Jewess, or Mary the Prophetess, or Mary the Alchemist. And she was a woman who opened a school of spiritual alchemy in Alexandria. And now we know about it as a fact because another great alchemist, who is a historical figure, Zosimus, speaks about her in his works as one of the greatest alchemists, ever existed, and that she was either Jewish or half Jewish, and that's why she was allowed to open a school of alchemy, spiritual alchemy in Alexandria, simply because, Egyptians could not do this. They could not share the knowledge with the foreigners, but because she was not fully Egyptian or she was Jewish, this rule didn't apply to her. Also, to make it even more interesting, Zosimus, who wrote about it, came from the city of Akhmin, and the city of Akhmin is also the place where the Gospel of Mary Magdalene was found. So I thought that perhaps there was a tradition already of Mary Magdalene in Akhmin, and that's why, he was able to pass to us this knowledge. So I came up with this theory that Mary Magdalene actually went to Alexandria and started the school of spiritual alchemy, which is also an alchemy of, so to speak, higher magic, which means transforming and transfiguring, physical body or physical matter into spirit. So I think it is an interesting possibility. I'm not saying this is the truth. I'm saying it is an interesting possibility. And if there are any questions, I will ask about questions in a moment, but if you don't mind, because the best way to contact me is actually somebody asks. It's actually through my Facebook page, Dr. Joanna Kujawa, and also through my book. So just as I say, it sounds a little bit promotional, and I apologize for this. But for anybody who buys the book or writes a review on Amazon, I have a free workbook, PDF of a workbook, journaling workbook to find the lost goddess. And if you send me a screenshot of a purchase or a review and an email, your email, then I'll send it to you for free. But I would like to read you a fragment from the book in which Mary Magdalene, I imagine Mary Magdalene in Alexandria, and this will lead to a little meditation. So for those of you who would like to experiment with this, I would like to read it for, it's a very short fragment, so do not worry. So in this, although my book is a nonfiction and research book, here, I just at the end of the second part of the book, I just imagine, let's say that after the research that's true. And actually it came to me in a vision, which is something to admit for an academic. So this part came to me in the vision, and I'm just reading a small fragment of this part when Mary Magdalene comes to Alexandria and meets a scribe who wants to know what she knows. He wants to be her disciple. So I want us to imagine being the scribe, being, somebody who wants to be a disciple of Mary Magdalene in preparation for this reading and for this meditation. They sit down and he waves at a serving boy to bring them 2 bowls steaming with spices that remind her of her childhood here. Drink, he says. It will make you strong again. Teach me. Tell me what you know. How can she tell him what she knows? The training at the temple, the love of the beloved. You think you can love someone. Perhaps you have already loved someone, but when you meet the beloved, how can you speak of this without him? The journey that we are, the forgetfulness of the soul, the knowing that liberates. The scribe leans against the table and stares intensely at her. I know that there are protocols, that every step has to be taken meticulously. I have read everything that could be read, he adds almost desperately. My desire is real. This time she smiles, a little more. So much eagerness in this man. What do you want to know? She asks, almost amused. Because I know it cannot be forgotten, he answers with a seriousness that catches her attention. I will tell you the secret of the soul, she whispers, so only the scribe can hear. I will tell you the secret of all knowing, but first you have to forget everything you have learned and thought you understood. Do you understand? Yes, he says with the same intensity that she now recognizes in him. It is the oldest story in the world. It is the oldest story you will ever hear about the passage between life and death, about the creation and betrayal, about knowledge being perverted by those who don't want you to know, about the beings who choose to come back over and over again until the end of time, until the end of suffering. I will learn, if you learn this well, it will be the end of the unknowing, but this knowing will change you forever. The scribe looks at her expectantly as she gets up from the bench and says firmly, "Take me to the library first. I need to show you something." So I see them walking together. Her voice is almost a whisper. His head is lowered intently. There is hope now, she tells him. The new cycle will start. She looks up at the sky. The sun seems brighter than ever, even as clouds are approaching from the north. The veil is already parting, my friend, she tells him. The veil is parting now. If you can, please take a deep breath. And I want you to imagine that you walk with Mary Magdalene in ancient Alexandria like the scribe. You may close your eyes and just breathe deeply and think for a moment. Open up yourself to the possibility that she will part the veil for you and she will tell you what you need to know, that she will show you what you need to know. And have this intention throughout the day, because I think that veil is parting for all of us right now. And I would like you to connect with Mary Magdalene on her feast. Thank you so much. I hope the veil will part for you as well. Thank you. If you have any questions, please ask them now, and I'll also leave you some links at the bottom if you are interested. Thank you so much.